Welcome to the CCFR Radio Podcast, your source for news, updates, and stories from the CCFR.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 13 of the CCFR Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Yotaka. Thanks for listening in. In this episode, I'm going to give you a little update on the CCFR's new show on WildTV. I'm going to provide just a little commentary as well on a recurring situation that happens in our community of concern, I guess. And to wrap it up, I'll play an interview with Kerry Mould concerning his battle to get a copy of the FRT or Firearms Reference Table and the additional implications that it has had on our understanding of how government is supposed to work, including who's really in charge here. Thanks for joining me this week, and we will get started right after this.
Hunters and sport shooters have a lot more in common than they think. Politicians and bureaucrats will never stop pushing toward their vision of Canada where only the police and the military have firearms. All gun owners need to stand together. An attack on one is an attack on us all. Let these people know they do not have your consent. Stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms. Donate now or become a member of the CCFR at www.firearmrights.ca. And now, a CCFR update.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I hope you all had a great holiday, a great Christmas, great New Year's, and it met or exceeded all of your expectations. Unfortunately, here we all are back at work, back to the grind. And so now you've got an episode of the CCFR Radio Podcast to listen to. I needed a little break over Christmas, and so I didn't have one at the beginning of the month, but we are now back. So first thing I'd like to do is give you an update on our TV show. So I had a conference call with WildTV this afternoon, and what we've decided to do as a group is push back filming to start this April 1st to air the show in the first week of October, so Q4. And let me just tell you the reason why we did that. So one of the things I was doing to get ready for the show and, you know, obviously to schedule the content and to try to form this thing, because this show is never, a show like this has never been done in Canadian history, not by WildTV, not by anybody else ever, you know, exclusively focused on target shooting. So there's no production schedule or no experience to draw from other than maybe what we can see in American shooting shows. But again, it has nothing to do with Canada. So we don't have those relationships or scheduling or events or experience. So anyway, I was trying to work around that by creating this event calendar. I think I mentioned it in the last podcast. And what I found, gaining that experience in real time, is I found that there just aren't a lot of events out there in the wintertime because it's just so darn cold out here. So if you look at U.S. shows, of course, they can get content year-round because the United States is a lot farther south than we are, and there are states where it's sunny and warm all year round, and shooting happens all year round, and thus, you know, you can start your filming whenever. In Canada, it just wasn't the case. And I'll give you an example. The IPSC championships in Canada are in September this year. So if we're supposed to be starting, you know, filming in February, wrapping up in a few months, we're going to miss all of the big championships and all the great matches for all of the shooting sports. And that's just not going to work. This show has to be the best that it possibly can be right out of the gates. And and it's very important. So I'm going to touch on that in a second. So anyway, that's why we made the decision to move all the filming to start April 1st to conclude somewhere around, I don't know, I'd say July, let's say somewhere around July or August. And then maybe a few little bits and pieces will come after that, but the whole series will start to air in October. So we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for the show, but it's going to be a lot better as a result. Now, why is it so important? This is something I did want to make mention of. The reason why this show is so important, and it's so important right out of the gate. Why does it have to be awesome, you know, right from the first show ever? This is not something that I want us to grow into. And here's why. Never in the history of Canada has there been a television show that it features sport shooting. And why is that important? Well, sport shooting features a very specific group of profile of firearms, right? Which are handguns and a lot of black rifles, a lot of military pattern firearms. Now, why is the show important? The show is not a revenue stream for the CCFR. It's not a, you know, there's nothing to be accomplished there. I mean, it would be great if the CCFR got a bunch of money out of it. That'd be fantastic. But what we're trying to do is cover our costs and maybe make a few bucks, but certainly cover our costs. But the show is important because this is a huge victory, a huge achievement in normalizing the ownership of handguns and military pattern firearms. Part of the, you know, the reason why the CCFR exists, the reason why the CCFR was needed was we needed a public relations arm of the Canadian firearms community, and that's exactly what we are. And a public relations firm is centered on changing attitudes, changing culture. Now, this is, you want to talk heavy, a lot of people are out there, oh, we're doing the heavy lifting. Well, it's, anyway, I have a lot of thoughts when it comes to people out there doing next to nothing, claiming heavy lifting. There are certain groups of Canadians and certain Canadians doing seriously heavy lifting that I'm not capable of doing personally out there, and they should be credited for that, absolutely. And there's a lot of brave people doing brave work that I wouldn't be able to do, work that I couldn't do personally. So a lot of credit is due out there, but a lot of people out there doing next to nothing are claiming heavy lifting. Well, heavy lifting to me is defined as a lot of work that's difficult, that takes very particular expertise and takes a lot of discipline to keep continuing to do it, and work that eventually will make a difference. Not gratifying in the moment, but makes a difference over time. So that's the type of work that the CCFR does. That's why the CCFR was necessary, because people weren't doing PR work. And PR work is very thankless. It's not very glamorous. And it's a lot of extra work. And so anyway, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change Canada's culture. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And a huge tool to doing that is a mainstream television show that features people running around with black rifles and handguns. And what that does by extension makes people that hunt even more mainstream, right? And this is why hunters have a huge interest in the work that the CCFR is doing. Because I'll tell you, if Canadians, if your average uneducated in firearms issues, you know, in quotes, right, Canadian has no problem or now sees handgun ownership and people traveling to and from the range with their handgun and shooting their handgun, sees it on TV and sees that the people that do that are good, you know, trustworthy, reliable Canadians, which of course we are, statistically speaking. That's a fact, not controversial to say. Then when they look at hunters, they're going to be, oh yeah, absolutely. You know, if I'm okay with handguns and AR pattern rifles being shot at the range, God forbid we're able to hunt with those guns at some point in the future, which is completely appropriate and has no negative impact to public safety, then hunters will be more than left alone forever, right? So this is, as I said, this is hard work. It's important work. The show is a huge part of this. If we can get this show to be a phenomenally educational, a phenomenally entertaining, just fun to watch and really reasonable show, and we can present it in a way that it could be shown, let's say, on main networks like your Globals and your CTVs and all the rest of that stuff. I'm not saying that we could ever get there, but hey, dare to dream, right? If we could get it to that point, what an achievement. What a victory for gun owners. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's why we're putting as much effort as we possibly can into the show. I know that was a really long way to say all that stuff. I appreciate that you guys have patience with me and my long rambling diatribes, but it just, you know, I can't emphasize enough how important it is that the show is the best it possibly can be, and that the CCFR is able to do this. And so anyway, hopefully I've explained that properly and you see that. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to come back. I'm going to ramble on yet again just about an issue that we keep seeing popping up time after time in our community and what our position is on it. And then after that, in the following segment, we're going to have that interview with Kerry Mould. Super interesting. I'll say one thing before I break is that I had no idea. I'd heard of what Kerry was doing, but I had no idea how significant it was. So I think you guys are going to really enjoy that interview. So stand by. We will be right back right after this.
There are politicians and bureaucrats in Canada who believe honest, hard-working Canadians cannot be trusted with firearms. These people will stop at nothing to make sure they are the only ones who can possess them. Let them know you don't consent to their ongoing campaign against you. Stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms, now and for generations to come. Donate or become a member of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights by visiting us at www.firearmrights.ca.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, I wanted to talk before I get into the interview with Kerry Mould. I want to talk a little bit about no compromise. Yeah. Now, a few people have got the pucker factor going from a nice relaxed 2.5 coming up to about 7.5 now, because I use that terminology, and people are probably like, oh, where's this going? Well, this is actually a really important discussion. I wish I actually had somebody, you know, on Skype or whatever to talk about this with me, but I'm going to try to make my way through this really quickly. I've had to deal with the no compromise thing again today, and it's something that rears its head often, and it's incredibly damaging. So I wanted to kind of explain what my perspective on this is, why it's a good thing and why it's a damaging thing at the same time. So a while back, I was involved with another firearm organization, and they had a logo which was a beautiful logo, and they had a slogan that was the no compromise attitude. And I was immediately drawn to no compromise because I'm sick and tired of these people coming at me and them inserting themselves into my life constantly. And when I say these people, I'm talking specifically about the RCMP, and I'm talking specifically about the Canadian government, right? So the RCMP meaning the Firearms Laboratory, and the Canadian government. They just, no matter how much I comply with, they keep coming back and putting themselves into my life, wanting more from me, wanting me to prove yet again that I'm not a threat to anybody, wanting me to prove yet again my ability to comply with useless paperwork and to be demonized every time a criminal uses a stolen gun or an imported gun illegally to shoot somebody illegally. Apparently, I owe them an explanation for that, and I should pay penance for it. And I know that's a lot, to throw out there, you guys, but that's, I got involved in the no compromise ideology I got involved in firearm politics during the reclassification of the CZ858 and Swiss Arms rifles, because I owned a CZ858, and I'm like, man, like, when is it enough for you people? I still haven't done anything. So I was immediately attracted to that because that's how I felt, and that's how I still feel. Not one more step, and I'm going to fight you guys over it. And the idea actually of no compromise has evolved a lot. It's evolved in the last 2 years a lot. So now you have people still clinging to no compromise, but it means different things to different people. So for me, no compromise means not one step further, and I'm not going to sit on the sidelines any longer, and I'm going to fight you the whole way, and I'm going to try to be smarter than you are, and I'm going to I'm going to employ a certain strategy and use tactics to try to win this fight, period. That's what no compromise means to me. Unfortunately, well, no, I shouldn't say that. I don't think that's fair. To other people, no compromise means I've been somebody that is giving the government the finger, giving the police the finger, giving anti-gun people the finger, and unfortunately, the unfortunate part is giving other gun owners the finger. That's my no compromise. I'm just going to tell everybody to screw themselves, and I'm going to keep saying that until I get what I want. And it's been such a difficult battle that way, because there is, for us to win this fight, and I mean, what does winning really look like? It means that we stop the increasing regulation and we start rolling it back. That's what we're trying to do. And some people, I think they have this, I think I mentioned this on another episode, this destinationist view. Well, you know what? My ultimate destination is no licensing and no rules at all, and everybody gets machine guns, and nobody has to carry any ID, and we can trade squad automatic weapons out of the trunks of cars, down at the Home Depot. And I don't know. I can't tell you whether that would have a negative impact on criminal activity or not. I'm nobody to say that that's bad or good. But what I can tell you is that you're not going to win any hearts and minds with anyone if that's your ideology. So I'm not, so to be clear, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's not a great tactic right now from where we are today to get from A to B. I'll tell you what I do think is wrong, and it's that if I tell you that I want every rule rolled back as far as we can roll it, as fast as we can, and you say, no, I want everything now, if we're both working towards the same goal, for you to say, you know what, you're a detriment because you don't want exactly what I want and you're not willing to give everybody the finger to get it. You know, if I don't agree with the way that you are getting to the same goal, that somehow you've lost your humanity, that you're a problem to the movement. That kind of division is what we've suffered from forever. So I will say this. There's a small group of people in our community, and they're just like, well, if you're not willing to, publish on the CCFR Facebook page the addresses of people that work at the firearms laboratory and encourage your members to go to these people's houses and stand outside on public property and yell at them through the window, or you're not willing to do that to MPs, then somehow, you guys have no backbone. What we're doing at the CCFR, I think the problem is you have a small group of people that would agree with that. Like, oh, that's what we should be doing. And you know what? Who am I to say that that's not going to work? But that's not the way that we're doing it. And certainly the CCFR, that's not our focus. And that's not the tactic that I think is going to work for us in our overall strategy, which is to actually change the culture in Canada. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change the culture. And that is very sophisticated work. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's not work that a lot of people understand. And I don't blame them for not understanding. It's not something anyone's ever done before. So for those people out there, I think the problem is they just don't have the capacity to understand what we're doing. Okay, what we're doing is changing culture. It's very slow. It's hard to recognize the signs of us changing culture, but the signs are actually there. Number one, we actually have a shot at, well, it's not a shot. We're actually doing a mainstream television show about target shooting. When would that have been possible? Gun owners were hiding in the closet, shivering, shaking that their guns were being taken away 10 years ago. There was a lot of people from 10 years ago till now that have done a lot of work to get us to this point where, an organization like the CCFR could be available to pave this way now. We're taking over that torch, and we're going to take it to the next level. If you look around, our pals, there's so many people trying to get into Canadian firearm safety courses and get our pals that there's lineups. There are instructors that are booked months in advance. We have, at Abbotsford Fish and Game, where I'm a member, we have 400 people waiting on the waiting list to become a member of our club. I know other clubs are experiencing the same thing. There are not enough ranges to accommodate the people close to urban centers that want to shoot guns, right? There's a lot going on that are the signs that what we're doing is working. We have MPs out there, tweeting about how they're buying guns, buying their first handguns. I mean, that never happened before because the political environment in Canada, the political culture was so sensitive to firearms that no MP would ever risk their reputation to do it. Even city councilors wouldn't do that. But now you're seeing people coming out, as it were, as gun owners, and that's huge, and that is what's going to take us to the next level. And if I have to explain this, at a very base level, I will do it, and I'm going to do it in only a couple of sentences because I've been talking too long, and I'm sure you guys are sick of listening to me talk. I certainly am sick of talking already, which I get to the point where I just can't talk anymore. Is that we will not have an environment to support significant legislative change unless there's a Canadian culture that will tolerate that change. Go to the House of Commons right now and ask for a vote to collapse licensing. No firearms licenses for anyone, and all firearms, including handguns and military pattern rifles, including full autos, those should just be cash transactions. Go ahead, be my guest. Go walk in there and ask for a vote right now and see how far you can get. There's not even the conservatives would vote. You probably have 2 conservative members that would vote for that. I don't even think a single one. So no matter how many people you're giving the finger to or giving out their home addresses, that's not going to change anything. Okay, that's the reality. And to be honest, and I don't want to be condescending, right? That's not my motivation. But you can be my guest and ignore reality if you want to. the hard work, the real heavy lifting that has to happen is we have to change the Canadian culture. We have to change the attitude of the overwhelming majority of Canadians that don't own firearms, that we do not represent a threat to public safety, period. And that's what the CCFR is doing. That's what always needed to be done. That's what hasn't been being done. And that's what that's what we're going to be successful doing. So, you know, I think the rest of this should be self-explanatory. I don't have to go into any more detail. I'm tired of talking about, to be honest with you. So hopefully everybody understands exactly what we're doing and why we do it. No, we're not giving everybody the finger, because that's not the kind of organization we are. And that's not what our members need from us. That's not what gun owners need from us. So that's why the CCFR conducts itself the way it does. That's why the CCFR polices its Facebook page, which is full of journalists and full of we have infiltrators is what the word I was looking for in our group. And that's why we keep it clean. That's why we don't let people do the things that they want to do in other groups that are a little more edgy, because that's not what the CCFR is. So hopefully you understand it. Hopefully you understand where we're going and why we're going there. And if you don't, I'm sorry. We're just not going to be able to please all the people all the time. And there's just no way. Not in any group, and certainly not in the firearms community. It's too fractured. But know that we're doing the best that we can to heal those fractures. And if other groups and other people with other ideologies want to meet us halfway, we're more than happy to meet you halfway and unite and accomplish all of our goals together. So that's the message I have for now. So as I said, sorry for the rambling message, but I think sometimes these things have to be said. Anyway, I'm going to give you a break from listening to me blabber on, and I'm going to let Kerry Mould tell you his story so I don't have to talk in the next section. All right, so stay tuned, and we will be right back with that interview.
Over the past 25 years, tens of thousands of Canadians have had their firearms taken by no fault of their own through arbitrary reclassifications, paperwork errors, or senseless prohibitions. The government's perfect vision of Canada does not include you or your firearms. Let Canada's politicians and bureaucrats know they do not have your consent. Stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms by joining the CCFR right now at www.firearmrights.ca.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I hope you're going to enjoy this interview with Kerry Mould. I certainly did. I learned a lot out of it, and it was a very surprising sequence of events that he's been through. So I hope you enjoy it. Here it is, and I'll be back with you after.
So on the phone, we've got Kerry Mould, and which should prove to be a very interesting interview. Thanks for joining me, Kerry.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Excellent. So I really don't know a lot about your story. So what I think I'll do is I've got a couple of questions that were given to me as sort of notes, and I'm just going to ask those questions and then let you tell the story. So it's my understanding that you've been on about a 3.5-year journey to get a full copy of the FRT, and you did that via an access to information request. So what caused you to want to do this whole project in the first place?
So I heard a story about a gentleman in northern BC who had been stopped by the police and who had a Dominion Arms Outlaw. If you don't know what that is, it's a short-barrel 12-gauge shotgun. Kind of looks like a sawed-off shotgun, but it's actually produced that way. It is a legal, non-restricted firearm, but the RCMP officer who stopped him was not aware of that and was not very well versed in firearms, and thought it was illegal. So it was seized, and the gentleman went through a long court process. Eventually he was proven innocent, and then he had to travel all the way back up to northern BC to reclaim his property. That got me kind of annoyed as a gun owner, and the big issue for me is that all of the firearms in Canada are judged to be non-restricted, restricted, prohibited, and that judgment by the Canadian Firearms Centre is recorded in the Firearms Reference Table, the FRT. The problem is the FRT is not accessible to private citizens. It's a secret document that is held by the RCMP that determines whether your firearm, which category your firearm is in. And if it had been public knowledge, the gentleman could have gone to the FRT page on the internet, looked up his firearm, printed off the page that said, my firearm is a non-restricted firearm, put that in his gun case, and then if the question ever came up, if he was stopped by the police or whatever, he could say, here's the FRT, that's the number, go look it up yourself. And the police officer could have gone to his car, looked it up on his computer. It would have been all resolved in a few minutes, and it would have been, thank you very much, sir, carry on your way. But no, the FRT is completely secret, and I just felt that that was ridiculous. It's a document that was prepared using your and my taxpayer money, and it is used to judge whether a person is in compliance or in contravention of the law, and yet we're not allowed to see it. Mm-hmm. So that's why I started the process to get access to it. Yeah,
and at the same time, apparently ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking it.
Yeah.
And here in this situation, we, again, like just from the last episode of the podcast, we have a situation where you have an individual that's relying on law enforcement to know the law, and they don't seem to know it themselves.
Yeah, and I would say that in general, the level of knowledge of the Firearms Act among the frontline police officers who don't deal with firearms on a regular basis is relatively low. The Firearms Act is not well written, and it's complicated. It has a lot of what you might call loopholes or exceptions, and the average police officer is not really aware of those issues and items. And so when they see a short-barreled shotgun, they're like, oh, my God, you've sawed off a shotgun. It's illegal. I'm going to send you to jail. I'm going to be the hero. When in actual fact, it's a perfectly legal firearm that was sold over the counter, and the chief firearms officer has no objections to it. Okay,
so you asked the RCMP for the FRT tables. They said no. You filed a freedom of or an access to information request, and that wasn't fulfilled. And then what happened?
So I actually sent in the request for a complete copy of the electronic version of the FRT because I wanted it searchable and I wanted to be able to post it on the internet. And just to be clear, the FRT is available to certain people. If you're a foreign government, if you run a nice little dictatorship somewhere in a third world country, you can request the RCMP a copy of the FRT, and they'll happily send it to you so you can oppress your citizens. But if you are a Canadian citizen and you want access to it, well, you have to pay $600, and they'll send you a copy. But this is a federal government document that was prepared with our tax dollars. So I work at a job where I could have put in a submission, and they would have probably sent me a copy. But that would have been no good because I want to publish this on the internet. And if I was to do this through my job and then, violate the terms and conditions of the release of that FRT to me, then I'd be in trouble. So what I wanted to do was to go through the process of getting it through the access to information process so that I could freely publish it anywhere I wanted after I received it. So I put in a request to the RCMP on August 15th, 2014. They were relatively quick, actually. They denied my request by September 8th, so 3 weeks, at which point I said, that's not acceptable. They claimed that it was in the economic interests of Canada not to release this document, which I thought was a bit of a crock. Mm-hmm. So I appealed it to the Office of the Information Commissioner, which is the next higher level in the access to information process. And I submitted that appeal on October 2nd, 2014. And again, they were relatively quick to get back to me. They got back to me on November 12th, and they contacted me and said, hey, do you just want 1 or 2 pages of the FRT? The RCMP will print those off and send them to you, and then you could go away. And I said, no, I want the entire collection, all 300,000 pages. I want the whole thing, and I want it electronic, and I want it searchable so that anyone can go through and find what they're looking for. So the sort of the triage clerk at the Office of the Information Commissioner said, well, there is a lot of requests ahead of you. So he said, it's going to be years before we get to your request. And I said, I'm willing to wait. So it was actually February 22nd, 2017. So about just over 2 years, 3 months later, that they finally got back to me, that my request finally percolated to the top at the Office of the Information Commissioner. And I spoke to the investigator that was assigned to my file. She was very helpful. Actually, she had already done a lot of work into the file. And the first thing that she told me was that the clause with which the RCMP had rejected my original request, which was Section 18.1, claiming it was commercially licensed information, was not true. It had been commercially licensed information, but after a certain amount of time, that information reverts to the Crown, and therefore it was currently belonging to the Crown, and therefore the RCMP was free to give it out if they wanted to. So she also talked to the company that I had referenced in my complaint, which was Ultra Electronic Forensic Technology, who are the company that actually built the software and populated it for the RCMP, and the ones who were selling it. And she confirmed with them that she could buy a copy of it for $600 if she wanted, which is, contravenes the claim of the RCMP that this was, some sort of secret information and it couldn't be distributed. So she went back to the RCMP and questioned them on this. And the RCMP promptly came back to her and said, oh, we can't give you that information because it contains personal and private information of Canadian citizens. And to which the investigator said, but you've already told me you've given that to foreign countries, so if that's the case, I'll be transferring this to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner to investigate the RCMP for violation of the privacy of the people who you just said you gave it away to, which the RCMP quickly backpedaled and said, oh, no, we're withdrawing that. There's no private information. And so that all came back around. It went around a couple times. And then the whole thing went silent for about another 6 months. And I followed up in August of 2017 saying, I haven't heard anything from my investigator. What's going on? Turns out that the investigator had left the Office of the Information Commissioner. My file had been thrown back on the pile, and I was now waiting again for another investigator. But because it had been such a long time, they actually bumped it up to the director. And so on September 18th of this year, or last year, I guess now, I spoke with their director, who indicated that the file had been bumped up to management to look at. And I did manage to talk to the director on the phone, and she said that basically what's happening is the RCMP has said, we're just not going to provide it. Even though the Office of the Information Commissioner has said there are no legal grounds for you to refuse to provide it, the Office of the Information Commissioner has no legal power to force the RCMP to do anything. And so the reason it was with management is because they were in the process, they wanted to send it to the Office of the Information Commissioner legal team to determine whether or not there was sufficient grounds for them, for the Office of the Information Commissioner, to go to a federal judge, present the case, and then have a federal judge issue a subpoena to the RCMP to force them to provide it under the pain of law. And that's basically where we stand right now, is that I spoke with my investigator this morning, and she confirmed that they have sent it back to the RCMP saying, you have no grounds. Our next step is to make a legal case of it and ask them if they're going to provide the document. And that's where we stand after 1,237 days.
So we've got the RCMP, excuse me, being obligated to provide that information really through law, and there's really no reason they shouldn't, but they're digging their heels in and they're forcing another, aspect of the government to take the government is taking the government to court to get something that's really not a big deal. Well, exactly. And the thing is, and I've talked to a number of people, and they've said, well, is this some sort of secret document, with very classified information? Does it say where every gun in Canada is? And I said, no. This document is essentially an encyclopedia, a database that shows each type of firearm that's in Canada. So if there's at least one of that type of gun in Canada, they will have a page which will have a picture of that gun, which will show where all the markings are, where you find the serial number, where you find any manufacturing markings. It will say who manufactured it, when was it manufactured, where was it manufactured, and it gives some detail on the firearm itself. But it's basically just a reference. And the key things that are on that document is there is a number, which is the unique identifying number of that type of gun. So whether it be a pistol, rifle, shotgun, every type of gun has a specific identifying number. And the most important part is it says, is it non-restricted, restricted, or a prohibited weapon? That's the key information that's there, and none of this is in any way classified. If you're a gun owner and you have any gun magazines, or you have, they used to have the old Gun Digest, which was a big, thick, 1-inch thick book that had pictures of firearms and details about who made them. That's basically what this is, except in an electronic form. Well, it seems to me that the RCMP couldn't find a real reason to not give it, right? Because they said, oh, there's personal information. Oh, never mind. There isn't. Yep. Oh, we need it for commercial purposes. Well, never mind. We don't. They didn't say, here's the problem. There's proprietary information. Let's say if I were to pull something out of the air, let's say that, how sometimes they'll imply that a firearm is easily converted to full auto operation, therefore it must be prohibited. Maybe they had, the procedures or something in there on how they did it, and thus determined it was easily, I'm making air quotes, right, easily converted, with a paper clip or something, obviously. If they had that kind of information, like if they had a real reason, I would imagine that they would have said the real reason and then dug their heels in to say, this is really, this is our compelling justification to keep this out of the public domain. But it seems that they didn't have a reason, and that this is, and, I'm not jumping to conclusions because I wasn't privy to these conversations, but from the outside, it almost looks like, again, a case of weak men trying to assert their dominance over everything around them and to show that they have ultimate control of their domain. I mean, I would understand if they could find some justification, but it doesn't seem like they're willing to even share the justification. No, and this is part of the problem, is that, if they had a well thought out, rational justification of why this can't be provided, if they presented that, at least you'd be able to refute it or argue the point. But they're not saying anything at this point. At this point, they're just digging in their heels and saying we're not going to provide it. And so one of the things, after sort of I got through the first part of the first ATIP, I decided to put in a second one this summer. And the second one is kind of maybe a bit cheeky, but I asked for specific details, including the date, number of copies, countries, level of government, and or police agency that the RCMP has provided a copy of the Firearms Reference Table since 1994 when the FRT was created. So I put in a second one basically saying, okay, you only provide it to other governments. Well, tell me who the other governments are. Part of my rationale for asking for that information is if you can go to the Office of the Information Commissioner and say, they've given out 10,000 copies
how can they claim that it's so secret that it can't be shared with the Canadian public?
To me, it's always mind-boggling that you have a bureaucracy, and the RCMP at the management level is obviously a bureaucracy that shows so little, well, basically no respect for the system that itself gives them their authority. And in the last episode, we had another story about someone who sued the police. I'm sure you heard that one. And some people, they get very sensitive that we're doing now 2 stories in a row where obviously we're having trouble getting, agencies that we trust with this level of authority. We're having trouble getting them to behave in an appropriate manner. And it's not that we're trying to shed light all the time on these things, but these are the things that we confront constantly as gun owners, as law-abiding, the most vetted, most reliable citizens in the country, proven fact. And this is the type of behavior that we're up against all the time. And the problem for me, as I said in the last episode, is I have a lot of friends that are in law enforcement. Some that are spent their entire careers and are now retired. And it's just really a disservice for management to behave in this way. And it denigrates the reputation of the people that I think represented law enforcement in a positive way. So, yeah, it's really unfortunate.
And one of the things I want to make very clear is that I've had excellent support from the Office of the Information Commissioner. Their investigators have worked very diligently and represented my case and followed up on all the sort of obfuscation that the RCMP has thrown their way and worked their way through all these issues. And they're in a difficult position because they don't have the power of subpoena. They can't order a government department to provide the information. They have to, as I talked to them, to their staff, they said they have to make a decision as to whether they're going to go to court and spend thousands and thousands of tax dollars to pursue this case. And one of the possibilities that was presented to me is they said that it may go all the way through the Information Commissioner's office. It may get to the Information Commissioner herself, get on her desk, and she might say, that is an excellent case, you're fully justified, but I don't have the money to sue the RCMP, so I'm going to turn it over to you, and with my blessing, you can sue the RCMP yourself. But that's a pretty sad commentary on the state of our democracy and of the bureaucracy that works for the democracy, when a citizen would have to sue a government agency to force them to provide a very mundane technical document that they're holding back for no apparent reason except just to be, obstructive.
Well, isn't it interesting that the RCMP would be in a position to want to go to court? And I thought that they didn't have enough money to roll out carbines to their members that need those to defend themselves and defend the public. I thought they were short of money.
Well, apparently they have, and one of the areas where they're saving money is they have cut their ATIP department, because when I submitted the second request, I got a reply back from them saying, we are experiencing a large volume of requests resulting in lengthy delays.
As spurred on by our bad behavior. It's generating all kinds of extra paper flow. Well, really quickly, what does it take to submit an access to information request? So, access to information requests are open to any Canadian citizen. You simply can go to the internet on Google or whatever, look up access to information. It'll take you to a page where you can compose your question. It costs $5 to submit an ATIP request, and that's it. And you can even request email communication. You can request all kinds of stuff, not just general information. So, yeah, exactly. I would encourage people to do that too. Presentations, emails, memos. There are certain things that are restricted. Anything that is classified or done in confidence to cabinet will be excluded. But general correspondence between government departments is fair game for everybody. Yeah, I would encourage people to do that as well. It's a good thing to keep them. I don't know if we could ever really keep them honest, but at least we can keep them on their toes. How about that? Well, that's a very interesting story, and we'll keep an eye on it, and hopefully we'll get an update at some point in the future. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with us, Kerry.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed that interview. I found that to be a real eye-opener. I found it to be shocking, right? The interview with Kerry on many levels. But anyway, we're gonna keep up with Kerry and his fight for common sense from the government, for transparency, to get them to behave like honorable human beings. And I'll report back and let you know how that's going, either in some stories on firearmrights.ca or in future podcasts. So thank you, Kerry, for doing that. I just want to let you guys know there's a lot of interesting content coming up on the next few podcasts. It's just going to continue to get better and better. And one thing that I really need from you guys as a community is to share the podcast, get people listening to it. It's just exploding. It's doing really, really well. And we want to just continue to help this thing grow. So make sure you share the podcast, tell people to listen to it. It's a great resource for gun owners. Stuff like the interview we just had and the interview last week with Tyler Johnstone. That was a really interesting one. And there's always something, like I always learn a lot when I interview people like that. And that's why I don't talk a lot during interviews. I'm listening and learning. And I think other people learn as much as well, just hearing the experiences of other gun owners and what they've gone through. So really valuable. All right. So there's a lot coming up. And the last thing I want to talk to you about before I wrap it up for this episode is we really need your help. The CCFR needs your help to continue to go and to continue to grow. This is our big chance this year to grow the CCFR into Canada's NRA. We've never really had an organization powerful like the NRA. For good reason. I did a video about that a while back. You guys may have seen it, but we are getting really close right now. The CCFR is an organization, the likes of which has never been seen in Canada, both in the level of activity that we've been able to sustain for 2.5 years, coming up 2.5 years, and the types of things that we're doing. But we need your help to continue. We need your help to grow. So there's a lot going on. There's a TV show. There's all kinds of things that the CCFR is doing to grow, but we need your help to do it. So without your help, we can't do a TV show, first in Canadian history, dedicated to target shooting and action sports, bringing us to the mainstream like we've never had an opportunity before. We need your help to continue to sponsor Olympic athletes like Mary Patrick, so that the CCFR logo and the awareness of firearm issues in Canada goes to the Olympics, is on camera at the Olympics. Pretty awesome. We need your help to continue to make unprecedented tools like the explainer videos. The explainer videos like that are, if there was for a corporate customer, those things cost between $5,000 and $10,000 each. If we're going to continue to make those, we need your help to do that. Resources like gundebate.ca, people tell me all the time what a great resource gundebate.ca is when they're trying to talk to people and direct them to clear thinking. So, as I've said before, gun control is an intelligence test. It really is, or it's a test of people's ability to be reasonable and look at information and rationalize it, in an intelligent manner. So gundebate.ca has been a huge resource for people doing that. We also need your help to continue to sponsor advertising, like on WildTV for Canada Hunts, to get more firearm owners involved in our community. I've said before, we have 2.1 million licensed gun owners out there, and yet we only have around 20,000 people involved in the firearm advocacy community, which is insane. And we're never going to get powerful as a voting bloc, powerful enough to really sway things, the big change that we all really want, until we grow our community. We need 50 to 100,000 people involved in our movement, and we're not going to get there unless we reach out. We actually actively reach out into the community and grab those people, tell them why it's important that they get involved, right? And we do that through advertising. So I need your help, and we need your help to continue to grow. This is the CCFR's year to explode and to become the organization that we all want it to be. It is already, but we need it to double in size. So what that comes from is people becoming a member of the CCFR. And if you don't want to become a member, or you want to help, donate. The donations are even more important than the actual memberships, because there's no cost associated to the CCFR for donations. So help do everything you can to help. We need you, and let's all get together, pull hard, and we'll have a huge year for all gun owners this year. Anyway, thanks for listening. Share the podcast, and we will see you next time.
This is another episode of the CCFR Radio Podcast. Remember, if you don't stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms, who will? Join the CCFR or donate right now at www.firearmrights.ca.